And they asked him, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" And Jesus replied, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second is like unto it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Over the summer, during our 5 p.m. service, we had a sermon where I asked the people to try and name the 10 commandments. I really enjoyed this sermon. And what was fun about it is that people kept saying, "Love your neighbor, love God." I'm like, "No, that's not in the 10 commandments." They're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yes, it's not in the 10 commandments." But I love that people remember that, because as Jesus says here, those are the greatest commandments. Those are what are under the base of all the other commandments, which is 613 if you're going to be technical with Jewish law. But how do we do this? How do we go out each day and love God, love our neighbor? Really deep love. And I say deep love because in our society today, we use love pretty loosely. I love your hair. I love that restaurant. I love that TV show. Right? But English has basically one word for love. Other languages have more. But so we hear all those uses of love, and then we hear love God, love your neighbor. And I think that makes it harder for us to go deeper, to go truly into what that love of God means, that love of neighbor. So in my ponderings over how to talk about love and what it means to love, I turned to Bishop Curry's book. It's Love is the Way, Holding On to Hope in Troubling Times. And he says that the purpose of the book is to describe what the way of love is. And early on, he begins with a story about one of the faces of love he has encountered. Her name was Josie Robbins. And she was a lady who looked after him and his sister when his mother went into a coma and eventually died when they were quite young, 10, 11. Now this lady, his dad was a priest, but this lady didn't go to his father's church. No, she dropped off one of her neighbor's children while she went on to her Baptist church. But then she heard what had happened, that the priest's wife was in a coma, and she said, "How can I help?" And his father said, "Well, can you iron some clothes?" So she came over, and this huge pile of clothes on the bed hadn't been ironed. She ironed them. The lady called on the phone, "Can you give them some lunch?" And she did. And she kept coming. She looked after them. She took them on outings. She became their surrogate mother. And today is still part of their lives at the age of 85. That's love. That was a face of love for Bishop Curry in a very difficult and challenging time in his life. Not a good family friend, a relative stranger who showed up and loved those kids through her actions. Another example of love is the Pope, Pope Francis. And this week, I want to quote what he said. We found out, he said in the film, homosexual people have the right to be in a family. They are children of God. You can't kick someone out of a family, nor make life miserable for them. What we have to have is a civil union law. That way they're legally covered. Wow, right? Wow. Because this is the Pope of the Catholic Church who has recently said it's intrinsically moral, it's an intrinsically moral evil to be homosexual, and it is not to be encouraged. Now, granted, it's not the church saying this, the Catholic Church, but it is the Pope. And it has given a lot of hope to LGBTQ, I should know this, LGBTQ plus Christians and beyond, and many, many others. That is an action of love. Those are words of love, and it does not come without a cost. Because one of the, what's his name? Ed McMahon, Director of Public Policy for the Archdiocese of New York, says the Pope has erred. I was like, wow, he's really going to walk a hard road because of those words. But that is love. That's the kind of love God is asking us to have in this world. And as I kept thinking about love, I thought about our pantry volunteers who in the worst of the pandemic kept coming into Perth Amboy, #1 in infections in Middlesex County, to help give food to people who are standing in very long lines and who work for hours and hours to make it happen. That too was love. As Bishop Curry writes, this is not sentimental love, but something fierce. This love is a verb, it is an action with force and follow through. When we pull love out of the abstract, really put it to work, it starts to reveal its extraordinary power. How do we stay focused on this kind of powerful love? How do we love in a world that seems to be less loving each and every day? How are we part of that love that can change this world? And Bishop Curry gave some spiritual principles to practice, because one thing he said, it takes intention. I know we all get up and try to be loving every day, we do. But it takes very clear intention to have this kind of love, to decide, yes, we're going to look after someone else's children and give our time. And yes, we're going to say words to the world that cost us. And yes, we're going to put ourselves perhaps in danger to help another. To have that kind of love takes intention. And he has 9 spiritual practices, and they're based on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 10 commandments for nonviolent response, for loving, for building that beloved community. Now, I want you to, if you have a pencil or pull out your phone or something, because I'm going to ask you to take notes, because I'm going to share 4 of them, not 9, and never ask you to take notes. But you can take notes in your phone, you can take notes with this pen. There might be, we took all the pencils out of the pews, I'm not sure. Yes, we did. All right, well, it'll be posted later for you to take a look at. But here are 4 of the spiritual practices. 1, meditate daily on the teachings and life of Jesus. When we are connected to that source, that ultimate source of love, that enables us to love. And we see that in Jesus's life. We see God's love in Jesus's life. That's that ultimate source. And if we're connected to it, through prayer or meditation, or just taking a walk and reveling in God's love, that will shore our hearts up and turn our attention to having that kind of love. Meditate daily on Jesus' teachings and his life. 2, remember always that the nonviolent movement seeks justice and reconciliation, not victory. Reconciliation, not revenge. How often do we go out into the world and we try to win no matter what? And maybe if we let go of winning, we can find a way to reconcile. Maybe if we let go of winning, we can find a way to hear the other person. Maybe if we're not trying to push down the other one and be on top, we can find a way forward. Reconciliation, not victory. 3, seek to perform regular service to people in the world, to others in the world. And he calls it working out that love muscle and doing it on a regular basis, because that helps remind us of the other, the needs of the other. It takes us away from selfishness, which is opposite of love, and puts ourselves into another's shoes, so we can see how they live, how they work, and listen to what they need on a regular basis, he says. And finally, 4, refrain from the violence of fist, tongue, and heart. Now, most of us are not going to go for fist, I hope. But tongue, oh yeah. Heart, yeah. Those are hard. And when we get angry, Bishop Curry says, when we have the angry thought, note it and let it pass along. We're going to have them, yes. What do we do with them? Do we hold on to them or we let them go? Refrain. Refrain from violence of fist, tongue, and heart. Our presidential election is 9 days away. And I don't think I've ever faced an election when I just don't know how it's going to go. Usually we go to the polls, we vote, we hear who won on TV at some point. This time we don't know. There's much uncertainty. And I worry that no matter which candidate wins, there's going to be unrest and violence. I hope not. I'm praying for peace. And I ask you to do the same thing too. But I worry. And so if there is a time where we need to go out and bear this extraordinary love, this fierce love, this love of action, which has the power to change the world, it is today, it is tomorrow, it is now. We need to bear that love into this world, because it can change the world. On social media, in the grocery store, at home, at work. And I want to share one last quote from Bishop Curry, and he writes, imagine, if you will, the impact of each and every person on this planet taking the time to define and then live out loving principles. In fact, imagine 50% of everybody doing this and being successful even half the time. Politics, businesses, and commerce, religious life, and community would be transformed. So I invite you to be part of this intentional effort to have this love. Not that I love the movie, no, that deep love action. And look at the 4 principles later this afternoon that you've written down. And pick one, and then pick a way to practice that principle this week. So just pick one, don't pick all 4. Pick a way. And maybe write it in the mirror, make a note so that it stays with you. Because when we start letting that kind of love Jesus asks us to have loose in this world, it changes the world and becomes closer to that beloved community God longs for. Amen. Amen.